Good morning again. This is Camilla Tulloch with Inceptus Cybersecurity. Thank you for joining us for our webinar where we pose the question, is your MSP covering all your cybersecurity bases or are you at risk? Today, we're going to look at the definition of an MSP versus an MSSP and the common gaps, security gaps left by MSPs. And what most importantly, why you need to know this for your business. At the end of today's webinar, we'll address any questions you have, so please feel free to add the questions to the Q&A. Today, we're going to be talking with John Schlager, CEO of Inceptus Cybersecurity. Good morning, John. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great, thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into cybersecurity?
Sure. My name's John Schlager. I've been in IT and cybersecurity for 30 plus years now. I started my career, I worked for a company called US Internetworking. We pretty much invented software as a service back in the mid to late 90s. There I kind of was in charge of, network engineering and those types of things, which, before cybersecurity was even a thing, it was called information security, and that's kind of where I got my start. But, after that, I went to work for the EPA's Criminal Investigation Division. I was an information security officer there, making sure that they were secure and tight and making sure that we didn't have any foreign adversaries or anything looking into our data. After that, I went to work for Booz Allen Hamilton. I was an associate there. I worked at the National Security Agency with a group of threat hunters. I used to go around to DoD and intelligence community looking for bad guys, essentially, and ways to eradicate, harden those programs, and move on. After that, I went to the Chief Information Security Officer of the United States Capitol Police, took a failing program, turned it into a model for the legislative branch of the U.S. government. And then I moved to New York, started a company called Scout Cybersecurity. There we started an extended detection and response platform, sold it to Scout, or sold that to actually Barracuda in 2018, and then started Inceptus in 2018.
Excellent. Great. Well, thank you for sharing us that with us today. Excuse me. That's a very extensive background you have in cybersecurity. I'm not sure many other people can can say the same. So, in your opinion, what are MSPs and what are some of the services offered by MSPs?
Yeah, absolutely. So an MSP is an acronym. It stands for Managed Service Provider. And, MSPs, they offer a wide range of IT services to help manage and optimize organizations, IT infrastructure and their operations. They can help businesses usually in the smaller space, the SMB space, because once a larger company will usually have internal IT assets. So MSPs kind of function into the smaller business realm where they can help, with multiple different services. Their primary focus is on administration. They do network management. They help with your IT management. They provide technical support. They can patching, endpoint protection, backup services that are there, things that you need for your business on a daily basis. MSPs provide those things for you. They fix your computers, keep you updated, operational, keep you up, and there. But most of the time too, they also provide IP, ISP type services. So internet service providers. So, internet links, firewalls, some overlap with, cybersecurity type things, but, they mostly provide telephony services and IT support. So.
And will businesses find that there are different types of MSPs?
Absolutely. So MSPs run the gamut. I believe there's probably 40,000 MSPs here in the United States today. A majority of these are smaller businesses, probably mom and pops. We call them garage guys, essentially. They're probably not as educated, but they provide services that are needed by businesses. Microsoft Windows type things, making sure that they have Microsoft 365 and their cloud service providers, they help with all that stuff. Make sure you're operational. You can do your job essentially as, business needs on the IT on the internet, essentially. So.
Okay. And what are some ways that MSPs could be leaving their customers at risk from a cyber standpoint?
Yeah. See, MSPs, like, they focus on the IT side of the house. And when I say that, they do supply some cybersecurity services, but they kind of focus on the IT stuff. So when they do that, there's a lot of things cyber, has to happen within an organization or a business. A lot of that time, MSPs, they put an insufficient amount of focus on cybersecurity. Maybe they really just don't understand cyber totally, or they know enough to be dangerous, essentially. So they may lack that specialized security knowledge that's needed to truly protect an organization and reduce its risk. I have there's quite a few breaches that I've had to deal with because of MSP shortcomings. So when we come in, we kind of see sometimes that MSPs aren't doing those things that need to be done, to secure that infrastructure. So you know that's kind of, yeah.
Okay. All right. Can you elaborate on some of those vulnerabilities or some of those um, lackings that you're seeing from the MSP side that might create a cyber risk?
Yeah, absolutely. So, sometimes, MSPs, they might, and not to fault them, they just probably do not have that breadth of knowledge for that stuff. So when they go ahead and they start implementing these infrastructures, just like Microsoft designs everything that it will work, coming out of the box, MSPs kind of tend to do the same thing. So they'll end up implementing and integrating these into a business environment, but they're not hardening that environment, making sure that all of those little switches are done and that they follow some sort of risk-based framework or some sort of hardening guides to help ensure that they're doing all of those things to protect that business. Sometimes we go into organizations and, basic things that aren't set up kind of tend to lead toward that essential incident or that, cyber, intrusion, whatever you may want to say it is. And so,
So, how would a business make sure that they are getting the cyber protection they need if they are currently using an MSP?
and that's kind of the thing. MSPs become that, trusted advisor for a business. So when they come in, they expect and they have that relationship with that business owner. The business owner expects that that MSP is doing what they need to do to secure that environment. So the kind of the problem with businesses is that a business is building widgets, so they're doing their core business, but they don't have time to focus on all of these nuances, not only with IT but with cyber. So we end up with this kind of a lax environment to where it functions and operates properly, but they may not have that hardened or the proper security installed and implemented within that environment.
So, what's the solution then? Is there
So, I mean,
is there um is there an organization that can help with that part of the security, the cybersecurity part?
well, I mean, absolutely. There are things that are out there, just like we have MSPs, we have MSSPs, which are managed security service providers. And we'll go into detail with them as a little bit. So they're more experts in cyber and that sort of thing. So to truly understand your risk as a business and how you operate, we have to, look at that and see that risk-based approach, to make sure that we are checking all those boxes and doing all those things that we need to do. The threat landscape out there is incredible. Since 2020, we've doubled the amount of cyber attacks that have happened, in that short amount of time. And it's only going to get worse, especially with geopolitical things that are out there and, hacker groups, people getting on the internet. There's so many reasons why this is growing and becoming such a flagrant problem. Desperation breeds motivation. We say this a lot. So, you have a kid in Africa whose family makes $200 a year when they can sell a single record, for $200. So if they have that intelligence and that drive, it's easy for them to come up with ways to extort people, and MSPs, they try their best, they're doing what they can, but they might miss that mark. So when you ask that, there are certain things that you could do is to try to find a cybersecurity expert out there, to help and navigate that because they understand those risk-based frameworks. They understand that, governance and compliance that's there and what actually needs to be done to secure an infrastructure.
So is that where an MSSP would come in?
Absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit about what that is and what services they provide and how they differ from an MSP?
Sure. So an MSSP, another acronym, welcome to IT, is Managed Security Service Providers. And, their primary role is IT security. They focus on providing specialized cybersecurity services to protect an organization from cyber threats. Their services are kind of extend past what an MSP does around that break fix, that, IT type stuff. This kind of ensures the protection of those IT assets, those cloud environments, and those sorts of things. Some of these services could be, different types of comprehensive security solutions. There are kind of crossovers between MSPs and MSSPs. We kind of provide some of those services that are similar, and we call those basic cybersecurity services. Different types of antivirus solution, anti-ransomware, firewall type things. There's, email protections. There's all these things that we do the same as an MSP, but then we can extend past that. So, most MSSPs try to find a model or something to look off of, like the MITRE attack and defend frameworks that are out there. But they're an MSSP's focus is on providing those managed security services for an organization. That's usually wrapped with some sort of incident response and recovery. That's advanced threat detection and response. SIEM and SOC services. A SIEM is a security incident and event manager, and then a SOC is a security operations center. So those combined kind of can take logs and information from all of these different assets within an organization to kind of come up with, good ways to reduce or remediate incidents as they happen. Advanced email protections, things that are beyond, what are provided with Microsoft or with Google Cloud Platform. Phishing and those sorts of things kind of get through a lot still. Security awareness training as a service, security assessments, audits. There's also some tend to do professional services. And what we mean by that are those assessments that you were talking about earlier. How can you find out where your risk is? And that is through an assessment using some risk-based framework to try to check how your organization is doing against a standard that's out there. MSSPs also do continuous monitoring, incident response. I kind of said those ecosystem hardening. And what we mean by that is kind of what we were talking about before, using different standards that are out there, benchmarks. The Center for Internet Security has things out there called benchmarks that we can use to see how we harden these different operating systems, these security products, firewalls, how you harden your browser, things that most people probably don't realize need to be done, and get on the internet and do these things. Those are ways that hackers can get in, see your information, help exploit and try to take advantage of those things. Some of them also provide vulnerability management services beyond patching, vulnerability scanning, things that are needed out there for that. And some also provide CISO as a service and Chief Information Security Officer to help guide the organization and make sure they are doing those things, that are needed to truly protect that stack. So
Yeah, that's really different actually from what an MSP does. If you consider that MSPs are taking care of computers and computer networks and printers and possibly phones and things like that, that an MSSP does a much different range of services than an MSP.
right.
So how do MSSPs address security gaps?
MSSPs, they do a lot of things for that. There's certain, like I was saying earlier, risk frameworks that are out there. The Center for Internet Security also has the critical security controls, and these are certain things that you should do to secure your environment. There's quite a few of them out there. Microsoft has hardening standards, all these types of things. But to truly, get to those gaps, you need to, have those services in your kind of, I don't know, in your bailiwick, in your little your security stack that you have. You need to have those services that are going to really hit each of those, GRC requirements or whatever. But if you follow a risk-based framework and help implement and make sure everything's hardened, that's kind of where the MSSPs shine. They've been there and done that before. They see these attacks, how they operate and how they can infect an organization and those different types of techniques. And from those lessons learned, they can make sure that doesn't happen to other customers, across their stack of customers itself. And
And
so
so, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So what kind of companies would employ an MSSP, or do you think it's all types of verticals?
Yeah, I mean, MSSPs kind of, usually sit in like I was saying earlier, the MSPs kind of focus towards the small business aspect. When you get to become a medium enterprise, you have IT people, you hire them in-house. Businesses that can't afford that usually use MSPs, to do that type of stuff. But
So I think where we left off, we were talking about why would companies employ an MSSP?
right. And so, just to jump right back into is what we were talking about was, these MSPs, do these types of services. MSSPs kind of extend them. So, why would they need to use an MSSP is for that security knowledge, that those people know how to, secure an environment better than possibly an MSP would or an IT person. When we talk about doctors and certain things that are out there, you're not going to, if you have a cancer or something that's detrimental, you're not going to go see a family medicine person. You're going to want to see an expert that deals in that particular problem. Cybersecurity is a particular problem and is an advanced way to do things, around cyber. So cybersecurity is like itself a cancer, and we have to hire an oncologist, and that's essentially what MSSPs are. People that want to use them are going to be somebody that has a lower risk tolerance. They can't be down. They can't have, maybe they're dealing with sensitive data or health information, PHI, PII, some sort of, intellectual property that they're trying to protect. If you can't, protect those things, your business is out of business, so.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine it's very costly for businesses to have that kind of business disruption.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially, and the data that they protect, there's stiff fines. Most people don't even realize that there's all these regulations, and, regulation is a growing business in this world. GRC, governance, risk, compliance, and regulation. There's all of these different, new things that are coming down. Privacy, California Privacy Act, New York Privacy Shield. That's about protecting PII data, private, personally identifiable information, all these things. So there's not just a fear and a loss of brand reputation. Now you have fines and financial problems. And most people don't realize that they could be regulated or they could have something happen from a state that attorney general is trying to generate revenue. Who knows?
Right.
They're giving that ability to go after customers and consumers as well as businesses for not doing what they need to do to protect it. And that's one of those things that hiring an MSSP, if you're focused on that, that means you're being proactive essentially, and that you're hiring experts to help solve those problems. So when you go, if you're that you are doing what you need to do to protect your organization. Yeah. So
Yeah, so that's completely different, a completely different scenario than being held for ransom and being shut down because you're being held for ransom.
oh, absolutely. So that's a whole other side, of all of this type of stuff, is being held for ransom. It's actually those incidents that happen from clicking on links or getting your credentials harvested by some hacker group, that can go ahead and in turn try to propagate. And I'm sure a lot of people out there have had this problem. They accidentally put in your credentials. You don't have multi-factor authentication on. It could lead to a bunch of other issues down the road. And like I said, one of those could be a financial thing from a state that, or a regulating body that says, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and you are flagrant about how you went about doing business, and you are ultimately liable. That's a big thing too with cybersecurity insurance. If you aren't doing what you say you're doing, and those questionnaires are getting pretty extensive, and almost to a point where they're like a regulation itself to get cybersecurity incidents to handle those types of incidents like ransomware mitigation, negotiation with hacker groups, whatever it is, you really have to, yeah, be careful of what you do because they might not cover you. Your cybersecurity insurance could be as worthless as the paper is written on if you haven't done those things that they asked you or said that you were doing before.
That's really interesting. I feel like we could have a whole webinar just on cybersecurity insurance and the sort of the logistics of it, because I have heard of companies that when they claim they've had a ransomware, and then the insurance company comes in to do their own assessment after the fact, and they find out they don't have any coverage, or they're not actually putting the securities in place that they need, then they say that they're not covered. So yeah, we should talk about that another time. Thanks
Yeah,
for that.
we've actually had that happen to a few of our customers. So,
Yeah.
well, they're
So
customers now. They weren't. When you say that?
right. What are some of the benefits of partnering with an MSSP, and how is this important to businesses?
Okay, yeah. One major thing I see is, cost-effective solutions, with a focus on security. Like in our stack and how we do business as a company, those were decided based on best of breed technologies that were out there, you know, bake-offs, those sorts of things. So, and trying to bring those to where they're affordable to our customers, that's kind of one of the benefits is that they've kind of weeded through all those products. They've tested them. They may know how they act and interact with the environment, and MSPs, they kind of get stuck, with some of the major companies out there like Kaseya, Datto, those kind of people that they kind of sell a bunch of services that may not be best of breed that are out there. There's companies that they bought, they've integrated into their solution. And, a lot of the MSPs are out there kind of stay with a single group. They might not be going for best of breed solutions. And that's how MSSPs differ a little bit from there is that they help, they may choose devices based on, that true cybersecurity need within an organization. Another reason is that they want to have that enhanced security posture. It kind of leads right into that. If those services are, like I said, best of breed, so you're going to absolutely have a better security posture because those tools are going to be better, and they're going to interact better. And on a 0 day, when that attack happens, you don't want to find out that your tools were not sufficient. We have a lot of customers that have certain EDRs and things that are out there that ransomware still gets through. It still starts to infect machines. Maybe they know a vulnerability within that security software, those sorts of things. Another thing too is, it's a better value for your investment because we're protecting cyber, and making sure that that risk is reduced within your organization, essentially giving you peace of mind. It's not a question of, yeah, my MSP has me covered. You hired a company specifically to reduce risk within your organization, and you get that assurance of having those experts and the security support when that 0 day does happen. It's kind of not an if it's going to happen, it's a when it's going to happen.
Right.
And when we say when, are you prepared? And that's kind of, I think, what an MSSP's ultimate goal is to implement all of these security stack services that are there to really kind of focus on how you can totally, secure that environment, and essentially that leads into 24/7, incident response recovery, and that's what you need. You need to have that ability to really, make sure that that incident is remediated and that there's not something lingering. We see that a
Right.
lot, as you know, hackers want to live off the land. We call that, LILO. So they want to get in, they want to act like there's something that exists within that network legitimately. Maybe it's an application, some sort of command and control, that sort of thing, and try to live off the land. And MSSPs are the ones that could potentially find those things, while MSPs might not be able to, based on the different softwares or the stack that they've used to implement.
Right. Or even not knowing what to look for potentially.
Absolutely. And
Right.
and that's another thing too, being cyber focused, it goes back to being an oncologist. Your life is spent on cancer. A cyber person's life is spent on IT security. So we want to make sure that all of those bases are covered, that maybe there's a solution. If not, because with cyber, we live in an ethereal plane. Let me say this, like, so there's no real ROI or return on your investment based on cybersecurity tools. Most people equate it to insurance, but it's not really insurance. It's more like a security guard that actually walks around with a billy club and hitting people, that sort of thing. That's kind of what cyber is a focused approach to ensure that you can be remediated as quickly as possible. So.
Right. And I can see that a preventative approach is probably much more cost effective than having to remediate on the back end, which is why people do equate it to insurance because it is a preventative measure.
Right. And it actually prevents stuff, and it's not like insurance. Insurance doesn't prevent anything. Like a hurricane
Right.
comes, it's going to destroy your house. Just like a
Right.
hacker comes and you don't have security in place, but you have insurance, they're going to destroy your house,
Right.
and look at hurricane insurance. They might not pay. Sorry,
Right.
that was wind driven. That wasn't
Right.
that
Right.
wasn't the hurricane that did that. So.
Yeah. Well, I think we that's all very fresh in everybody's mind considering the hurricane that just passed by and did terrible damage to this country. But we digress. So moving on.
Yeah.
Should
And I just want to say this too, Camilla, is that just to give some examples of things that have happened, from an MSP perspective. They had IT staff, they were thought they were doing everything that they could do, and we went in, we talked to them about cybersecurity, told them where their gaps were after an assessment. They didn't want to spend that money. They were
right.
kind of, well, this is kind of expensive compared, I think we have a handle on it. 6 months later, we get a call Saturday morning, 6 a.m., and ransomware is running rampant across their entire environment. So, having to get in there, if they would have had our services in there, that probably wouldn't have been an issue, you know, but it was a snowball effect and kind of took them down, that sort of thing. So they had IT staff. They had, I think, 14 IT people, working for that organization that are all dedicated to IT. One guy kind of is the cyber guy there, but really obviously didn't have a grasp on the potential problems that are out there.
Right.
Ransomware is a moving target. They're constantly looking for ways to get in and get and be effective and that sort of thing. But one thing I want to say too about focus of hackers, the focus of hackers, a lot of companies and government agencies have spent a ton of money, to secure those organizations. And what that's forcing hackers to do is to move their actions on objectives. Where do they want to go from here, right? Where do they want to where do they want to go? They want to go to easier land. And where that is in the small, medium businesses. We're
Right.
seeing this now, different types of policies that you can put in Microsoft 365 to deny access outside the country. So how do hackers get around that? They infect machines in the United States and they target bigger businesses, government agencies, election systems, we're seeing a lot of right now, those sorts of things. So, yeah, it's a moving target. Hackers are constantly evolving, and this is one of those evolutions. Is now they can infect and live off the land in a small medium business that's probably running some subpar antivirus at the most.
Right.
That sort of thing. Who thinks that they're secure, but now, and this is actually has happened before with a small company that was doing this, is they had kiddie porn on a system within their environment. So we had to call in, the Secret Service to come in and see all that type of stuff. They were totally not at fault, but they were at fault because they weren't doing those things to secure that environment. So somebody had gotten it in and used it as a staging and storage device to transmit and supply horrible, pornographic things to people. So
Oh, wow, that's terrible. That
that is terrible.
that's unreal. Like you don't even think that would happen.
Right. And it depends on the organization or the threat group that's coming after you, whatever their actions, whatever their motives are, we don't really know. A lot of the
So,
stuff that hits the SMB is opportunistic. It's not really targeted, like you
uh-huh,
see, like going after government agencies or DoD or something like that. That's targeted by, a higher threat actor group. If those threat actor groups want to attack that, they're going to infect a machine here essentially and use it as a proxy to attack somebody else. And
right,
that could hold that business liable because their systems were used to perpetrate certain attacks, kind of like that kiddie porn incident. So
right. So they were, yeah. So those people, that business was being used as a proxy, and they had no idea.
no idea.
And then going back to the incident where you got called on a Saturday morning, I know you can't disclose what company that was, but can you talk about the industry? Because I think a lot of people are under the impression that they don't need cybersecurity because they're not in a regulated space. But what?
That was a car dealership group. So a large car dealership group in the Southwest, pretty big, 12 different, car dealerships, those sorts of things. And they weren't regulated at the time, so they kind of were allowed to do whatever they want. But now, being that they've been considered a financial organization, now there's regulation. And it goes back to showing you regulation is coming and it affects people. Now they have to do, the safeguards, FTC safeguards. They have to, there's that risk, there's that compliance that they have to do, that regulation that states
Right,
that they do these things that are truly basic cyber steps,
right,
that really everyone should do, or really have to do business on the internet.
right.
So
So for a small business, and we talked about how every vertical really needs to worry about their cybersecurity infrastructure. Would it be what would be best practices for a small business if an MSP may not be able to cover them properly?
well, they could go to an MSSP, but that might not be what they want. Maybe they want a single, neck to choke essentially if something goes bad, right?
Right,
So I think we're seeing an evolution too in the marketplace between this. MSPs and MSSPs have grown up over the last, decade, trying to coexist with each other. Now, because of cloud services and things going back to that, there is a blending again of MSPs and MSSPs, and they're coming together. And where MSSPs and MSPs might not be there anymore in another 10 years, you may have a cyber focused MSP, that's doing those services that MSPs handle now traditionally. So we're
right,
seeing that evolution happen now and that need, for people to go after, so.
right. Well, thank you so much. I wanted to open up the floor to anybody that has any questions for you. Um, and we could possibly take a few minutes to see if anybody has anything that they want to ask you, maybe specifically on how to secure their small medium-sized business. Thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Absolutely.
So Bill says, you mentioned coexistence. How do I ensure that my MSP and MSSP work effectively together, cover all gaps, and eliminate finger pointing or turf battles? Thank you, Bill, for that question.
That is an absolute problem. We partner with MSPs that are out there to help them do those services, and help extend their stack, so something that coexistence between MSPs and MSSPs, there is kind of finger pointing sometimes if there's an incident, but you have to try to avoid that through process, through driving, that what you need to do, to secure that infrastructure. You got to keep open those lines of communication. You have to make sure that, you know, all of those gaps are closed, and that because sometimes MSPs have to be the ones that close those gaps. An MSSP in that relationship kind of is the fox guarding the henhouse. You don't, that sort of thing. If an MSP is doing that stuff themselves, so that MSSP essentially becomes the farmer and the watcher to make sure, that they're doing what they need to do to secure that henhouse, and that sort of thing. So there's definitely a lot of collaboration that happens, and they kind of have to be in lockstep with each other to make sure that they are covering this thing. So you don't have finger pointing after an incident happens, because essentially it's the MSSP that needs to dictate, and document, I should say, those different things that are out there to make sure that that MSP is doing what they're supposed to do to secure that environment. So
Understood. Yeah, I could see that happening. It would be great if you could find a group that does it all, does the MSSP and the MSP services all in one. That
right.
might make life a little simpler.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Well, MSPs, let me just say this too. MSPs, they're a good choice for businesses if you want to do, IT stuff. Like if you feel like your risk isn't that high, you don't really need to spend a lot of money, on securing your environment, whatever. MSPs help fill that gap, and make sure that, their IT infrastructure is running properly. You're up and operational. That's kind of the key role of an MSSP. Of an MSP, sorry. An MSSP's role is, a better choice for businesses that aren't risk tolerant. They want to, you know, outsource their security to experts. They don't feel like they can handle that sort of thing. And, especially if they're at high risk of cyber threats, which kind of now is everyone. So you kind of
Right.
need that cybersecurity expertise.
Right. Understood. Well, I think we are actually up on our time today. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us while we were having some technical difficulties. I have posted on the screen our contact information, that if anybody would like to reach out to us and ask questions, or speak to John in depth, please feel free to reach out to us. As always, we're here to answer any questions or concerns that you might have, and keep a lookout on LinkedIn for any upcoming webinars that we will be posting in the future. We'd really hope that you found this webinar informational and able to help your business in the future. So thank you, John, very much for your time. We really appreciate it. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.